no gold is not enough.
Welcome guys, welcome to this video. So currently in our app we have 3 coaches showing up in the main page. So when we go in hire today, and it fires an event that goes to database, and then when we go to home page we see more coaches. So first of all, I want these all coaches coming straight away, not by after clicking this button, because it should be a page of list of all coaches. So to do that, we go to the text editor. If I go to the single page here, so here at the bottom we are calling this, and this is the where we are putting the data, and here is the get coaches, that is getting all the coaches. So what I do is simply going to copy this and going to put the same event into front page. So I'm going to do that, front page.vue file, and here I'm going to create created lifecycle method from Vue, and inside it we are going to put this. Now I'm going to save this, and I go to home and refresh the page. So when I refresh the page, now we have all the coaches coming straight away. Now in the main index.js, initially we gave the coaches like this, so we can remove these coaches because now we are getting coaches from the database. So when page refreshes, this null coach is going to be assigned those coaches. So refresh, we still have the coaches, you can see the list. So if I go to any single coach, we have the detail for that coach. Let's work on the contact now. Now currently if we go to contact, I click there, we are not getting the path correctly. So to get the path correctly, we have a router link here, and here is the to where it is going to take us. So here we need to put colon because it is going to bind the coach ID the way we need it. So I'm going to save this file. We need to go back to home and refresh, and now if I go to hire today, then contact, now you can see that we have coaches, the coach ID, then contact. So this is going to be now working through another component. So if I go to the single coach component, what we need to do, we need to create a view router view in this one. So we want to show our form here. So half of the screen, this is going to be on click of contact, this contact form should come here. So here if I go BC, we have div with colMD6, and I'm going to close this one, and here what I'm going to do, I'm going to say router, and this is going to be view. All right, so when we click, and it is going to render another view. And the reason for another view is if you go to router.js, we have the path to single coach by the ID, and then we have a child component which is responsible for contact. Currently we haven't created any component, and we are going to create now. But the thing is, to work with child component, what you do, you create the router view inside the parent component, and that is going to render the changes inside the parent component. So let me show you straight away. So what we do here is first of all, I create a component here. So in the pages coaches here, we can create another file, and we can call it contact coach. All right, so I say here template, here h1 and child component. I'm going to save this and I'm going to go there. Now home page, refresh, I go to hire today, and then contact, and nothing happens. So okay, we created the component and I forgot to call it. We need to call this component in here. So first of all, let's call that. So here I say import, because currently we are saying for child contact there is component null. There is no component, so we need to pass the component here. So we said here that our component is contact coach, so we're going to connect coach.view. Now we can pass this name to make this component to be used for this one. So now it is going to be used for this one. So if I go to home now, refresh, and today contact, now we can see that child component text came here. Now if I go back, you can see that contact goes away from there as well as the text, and when I click here, it adds the as well as the content from that. So here, if I want to, we need to create a form, so let's create that straight away. So I'm gonna say form. Now I'm going to put some HTML inside it straight away. So I'm gonna just, all right, so nothing special here. We have an input type text, name is name, vmodel name, place name here. Then we also have a text area where we are going to get the message from user. We give the ID of message, vmodel message, and here we have input and the value is send, so it is going to be a button, and on click it is going to go to this function. So we haven't defined these functions and these properties, so let's do that. So I'm gonna say here script and empty object. So first we want to return name here because we are using name as well as we are using message. So that by default is these values going to be null, so name and message. Now we also want to create a function. So for that, what I want to do, I want to say here methods, and inside methods we need to create this methods process the button. This is the page which is going to check. So for now, what I do, I simply say if this dot name is not equal to empty, and also, all right, so we want to do something in that case. So for processing this form, what I want to do, I want to create a new module, and I will show you a new approach of dealing with Vuex when we so for example, currently we have modules and there is coaches, and if I go this index.js, we have state here, and then getters and actions and mutations all inside the single file. So we are defining our action here, and we have getter on top. But what if the application is big and you want separate files for each module? Each for actions you want separate file, getters you want a separate file, and for mutations you want a separate file. So we're going to do that now. So in messages, what I'm going to do, currently our directory is empty. I'm going to create a file called index.js. Now inside this file, I'm going to import. So I'm going to import, first of all, getters from, and I want to put getters inside the same directory. So I'm going to say here getters simply, and the same way I'm just going to copy and paste these here, copy this, paste here. Now here we want to export the similar way, so I say export default, and here what are we going to say? First of all, I want to use namespacing, so namespace to true. And afterward, what we want to do, we want to define state. So here I put state, which is going to return and message array, messages array, currently empty. All right, so here we can export actions, and then we have getters. How it's going to be. Currently we don't have those files, so let's create that. So for the here I'm going to create actions in the same way. We're gonna say mutation.js. Now we don't have anything in here, so what are we gonna do? We're gonna say export default, and similarly I'm gonna copy these to mutation and actions, just like that. All right, so we have action, mutation, getters, all three here. Then we are calling them inside the index.js. where we have namespace true and messages empty. So what we need to do now, we need to, in our application, if I go, we have, so this error we can remove it by just commenting this piece of code. Currently I'm not doing anything, so it is giving us the error, so it goes away. Now if I go to any single code, you will notice that we have an ID on top here. So this ID, that we can use this ID. So if you remember, we used the ID as props in router.js. So I said here props true. Now what we can do, we can also say here that props and equal to true. So we can again use this ID inside our child component as well. So that's what we want to do. So if I go to coach.vue here, I'm just going to say here props, and I'm going to define a prop ID. All right, so we want to save the message, so also we want to save from which coach this message is for. So here now what we can do, we can process this ID. So here what I'm going to do, I'm going to say this dot dollar store, and then dot, I'm going to say dispatch. So this dispatch, what it's going to do is going to go into messages and slash, then I will call a function messages, save message. Okay, and we want to pass some data, so I'm going to put here comma and an object, and here I will say ID, and then here I will say this dot route $route, and this is how you get the ID that we have. So params dot ID. All right, so we are going to get the ID that we have here, and we are going to put this ID inside ID, and then we are going to access it. Now comma, then the second is name, this dot name, and then comma, last is the message, this dot message. All right, so this is the data that we want to pass. Now we created an action, and we need to pass this data to it. So if I go to the actions.js here, we need to create this save action. So let's create that. So here I open this object, and here I'm going to say save message. All right, and inside it I would say constant, and it's going to be final data. Now what I want to do, I want to attach an ID with each message record, so that a dynamically generated ID will make those messages separate. So what we can do for that, we say ID, and I'm going to put date inside an ID. So I'm just going to new date and dot get time. So it's going to give us a number, and we're going to use it as a ID. Now we need a coach ID. So coach ID we need to get, because here we are passing this object as a second argument, if you remember. So here what I can say, I simply can say here context comma payload. All right, this is we have access to. So this payload is the second argument, which we are passing as a content. So this is the object, is the content that we can use here. So here I say payload dot ID. So now when I say payload dot ID, it is going to go inside it and going to get this ID. And the same way we can get the name and message as well. So dot message. All right, so we have now data coach ID as well, and as well as a generated ID as well. So now we should pass this data to Firebase. So to do that, I'm going to call the fetch function here, and this time we are going to pass the data. So I have it here. I'm going to store messages inside here in this database. So I'm going to go here, going to put like this. So we have messages. Now we want to put each message under a unique ID. So we have the ID getting generated here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use that ID here. So I'm going to put here slash and then dollar. And then we're going to say final data.id, because we just created this object here and we can use this object here. So final data.id is going to create a unique ID, and inside that we will have a message. And here at the end, don't forget to add JSON. So we add that here. All right, now we need to pass the data as well. So we say comma and the object, and here in the object you can define the method. So I say method, and I want to use the method put. So if there is data, modify it. If there is no data, add it. And also for the body, what I want to do, I want to say JSON. All right, so this is how it's going to be. Now as I want to do any code once we get any response from here, so I'm going to put here await, and in front of function async. All right, and now here, as we have access to context, we can commit to mutation. So we can say here context dot commit, and we can define a mutation function name. I will say add message, and here I'm going to pass the final data array like this object, sorry. So we can now define this. So now we have add message, we can create this mutation. So I save this file, and in mutation.js we need to create this now. So here add message, and we have access to state and payload. All right, and here what I'm going to say, I'm going to say state dot messages dot push payload, and this is going to set messages for us. So if you see, check it once again what is happening here. So if I refresh here, we have, and let's see first about this header. So we have the form here, and then we are saying process message, we are checking the name and message, then we are calling action, which is the save message action. And to call it this way, we need to make sure that we have the namespacing enabled. So if I go to index.json in JS, we have namespace true, so it should be working fine. Then we are passing ID, name, and message. Now if I go to this save message action here, so we have save message action where we have context and payload access to. So here I'm creating a constant final data, I'm putting ID, then coach ID is getting from payload, which is we are getting that this object that we are passing. And here when we have the payload, we are passing name, ID, and message, and we are then using this final data dot ID and as our parameter, so that each message will have unique ID for it. And then we are using method put, and we are using JSON stringify. Now we are passing our final data constant here, as well as we are passing here. Now for mutation, we have in mutation add message, we are state dot messages. Now if we go in this, we have the messages defined here, which is empty array right now. So here we are setting the value, so we are pushing payload, and payload is what you are getting the final data, that this data. So each time you put a new message, it is going to get added inside this messages array. So I go to home and refresh, so error goes away, and refresh the page. So let's say JSON, we want to send a message to JSON, so I hit contact here, message, and send. It says unknown action type. Okay, I forgot to do one step. So what we did here is, if you remember, we created these action scatters index, and we called these inside this index.js here, and then we are exporting this. But the thing is, we are not binding this to the Vuex. So if you go to main index.js, outside of these, it's a module folder. Outside of these, we have index.js. Here we have the coaches module, but the messages module we haven't added here. So we need to add that here. So what we need to do, we say import, and it's going to be messages and it's going to be modules, then messages this time, and then we have the index.js. Simple as that. And we want to pass this here. Now we call it messages. And here we pass it like this. All right, now it should be working fine. And if I'm not wrong, so my spelling should match here. So this messages, because this is the namespace we are going to use. So I go here, back, home, refresh the page, error is gone, hire today, contact, yeah, JSON, and send. Okay, so far we haven't got any error here. So if I go to the, and you can see that hi JSON, we just added here in messages, and then we have a unique ID. So the ID we passed, and then we have, if I go back, let's pass a message to Roger. So I hire today, contact, now pass this message. Now so currently we are not giving any notification, we are going to add that. So if I go here, you can see that another message is added. Hi Roger, I want to join some course. So name Steve, we have coach ID, and each unique ID is getting saved here. So now we have our messages getting saved in Firebase. What we can do, we can give the notification, because currently when we add the message, we are not giving any kind of confirmation that message is successfully added. So there is a package toaster. So we need to install this. And for installing it, we need to run this command. Now the link for this is in the description. You can use it, tab, and here I'm going to run this package. Package is added, and we can now use it. Need to import it. So what do we need to do? I go to the text editor, and here inside main.js, we are going to call it. So here I'm going to say import, and it is going to be view. Now we need to say view application to use it, so we're going to do that. So vue.use. Okay, so let's save this. All right, now what we need to do here, if I say getting started, we have some messages here that if we want to show the success, we need to do something like this. So I'm just going to copy this, go in here. Now we have our page where we are sending the message right here, and here I can add this. So what I can do, I simply put here. So once this is done, we can say here this, go to the browser, refresh the page. Now here, contact, so I say send, we have message sent successfully. So now we can add these kind of notification wherever we want, and maybe if we hover it, it goes and pause.
And I'll go